Hi, this is Josh, and this is my son London, and we have our son Braden again on the camera filming this with his Galaxy S4. Today we're actually going to skip ahead and we're going to do a fork conversion today instead of the bars like I said in part 1. And of course the reason is that my son actually races this bike in the Wisconsin Off-Road Racing Series, and we kind of need to get the fork back on so that he can race the bike in practice with it. And this is actually really not as difficult as you think it is. And all you really need to replace a fork for the most part is a 5mm and 6mm wrench. That's all there is to it. There's 3 bolts that you're going to take off, and that's about all the tools that you need to take off this fork. So the stock fork that Trek puts on the Trek 3500 is a very heavy fork, and we'll weigh it at the end to show you. But we're going to actually show you the weight of this fork, which is, it's actually, I believe, an older 2003 model RockShox SID, which actually stands for Super Light Integrated Design. These forks are extremely lightweight, and they're still pretty durable. They don't flex much. You can see a little flex in it, but once it's locked onto there, we're going to just weigh this fork right here. And Brady, can you get a close-up shot into there? So that fork weighs in at roughly 1,317 grams. That's roughly 2.9 pounds if you do your conversion. So that's a big weight savings, and you're going to see that after we put the new fork on, or take the old fork off and put this fork on. I think it's going to be roughly well over another 2-pound savings. This is a slightly more expensive changeover. I mean, you really got to search eBay, search for used forks that are in good condition. I ended up paying $162 for this used last year on eBay. I mean, brand new forks are not going to be $162, of course. You're going to, SIDs run up well over $600-700 brand new. You might be able to find a newer model that has what they call the compression and lockout on the fork. A lot of the older forks didn't quite have that in there yet, but for its time back in 2003, this actually was a good fork, and the person I got it from did maintain it very well over these last 11 years. There's practically no scratches on the stanchions or anything. It's in really good shape. London's used this fork in about 5 races already, and it's worked flawlessly. So London, I want you to start taking apart the fork. There's basically going to be 3 screws that you need to take off the fork with, and we're going to use a 5mm hex wrench for these 2 side bolts here.
6mm.
Oh, I'm sorry, it was the 6mm. 6 and a 5, not a 5 and a 4. So this is basically the 2 nuts, or 2 bolts that hold on the stem. Basically, the 2 bolts that hold onto the stem onto the steer tube. Now, there's also a top cap on top of the fork, and we actually have it unscrewed already. The reason for that is there's no star nut in there. There's normally a star nut inside of here that will screw into this to keep everything compressed together here. We had taken the star nut out and we had put it inside of here. Brady, if you can get a shot of inside there, you can see that that's what they call a star nut. And star nut, basically, this top cap screws in. That keeps the bolt, the fork, from moving inside the headset, vertically. So then it only does its normal rotation. So also to get this, we also forgot about taking the brakes off, and I believe the brakes, these are old style brakes. The basically the lever brakes. I believe this is a 4mm. No, I was wrong about that too. This is a 5mm. So we do have to take the brakes off. There's basically just, again, it's real easy. You just take this right here, pop that off, and then Lennon will take the 5mm, and again, it's just like you normally would do. It's just, you know, counterclockwise to unscrew it, to loosen it, and clockwise to tighten it. Alright, so we really need to take the tire off first. And I remember most bikes these days have this quick release on here, so we're just going to quick release the tire off real quick before we take the fork off. And we basically, while Lennon's doing that, I'm just going to quick take the brakes off. So the brakes basically then just come off. Alright, then you can basically, Lennon, if you can hold on to the fork, here's a good tool to always have a rubber mallet hammer. Don't ever work on your bike with a steel hammer or anything. Rubber mallet hammers are great for working with metal that you don't want to dent or ruin. Sometimes these the stems comes off rather easy for the most part, but sometimes you just need to just apply a little pressure and boom, comes off with a nice rubber mallet hammer. You haven't damaged your equipment at all. So at this point, we're going to slide off all the parts on the stem. These are basically spacers for the stem. In case you want a longer or shorter stem, you can use these stems to slide on and off. Some people like to cut their stems way down and run their handlebars really low, and then we slide off the top portion of the headset. Again, just try to make sure you keep those in order when you put it back on. If you've never installed a headset, it's real easy just to, just keep it in order. And then the fork just slides right out. So now we have the fork basically off. And again, we're going to need this bearing and this bottom portion of the headset to come off, so that has to go back on the new one. Now, on the original fork, there's a thing called the race, and the race is actually part of the headset. So we actually have to take this off and put it on the new fork. Nice thing about this fork is it has a little notch there. You can just get a little screwdriver in there, just do a little, just kind of wedge it under there a little bit, and eventually, you'll just pry it off a little bit. Sometimes this is good to do when you just have get the other side here, and we'll just keep working it off back and forth on each side, and one more on this side that should come off. And there's the crown race that comes off, and that is part of the headset, and that is always the first piece that goes onto the fork. What we'll do real quick here, we'll actually measure this old original fork. Again, I like to measure everything in grams. You can do the conversion to pounds if you want to. And as you can see, 2,365 grams, plus or minus there. I believe our old other measurement was just over 1,300. So we're saving over 1,000 grams, which is well over, again, another 2 pounds. So again, we're just going to take the fork. Again, real easy if you've done this before. It's really not that hard. Again, just put the crown race back on to the new fork. It should go down. It doesn't hurt to just kind of, again, take your rubber mallet, just kind of tap it down a little bit. always a rubber mallet. I can't stress that enough, that you work with the right tools when you're working on your bike. And again, most of the stuff that we've worked on so far in these series, these are all tools that you can get at just your local hardware store. Some of these tools that we're going to use in further parts are going to require you to buy specialized tools. So again, I'm going to have London grab the fork and put it on from the bottom, but we need the bottom bearing there first, London. Again, slide the bottom bearing on there. That just sits right there. Slide it, then slide the fork through. Okay, and then we can just kind of have it sit right there. And then we'll put the handlebars, which are still kind of in our way. I unfortunately don't have one of those nice fancy bike stands that people use to work on bikes. I just kind of make do with what I've got. And so remember, we need to put the top section of the headset back on. And then again, put your spacers back on. And then you can put your handlebars back on. And again, they might slide on easy, they might not. London, if you can hold the fork there to make sure it doesn't slide out. I'm just going to use the old rubber hammer and just kind of give her a little tap, because this isn't going to hurt anything. A lot easier to do it this way than sit there and try and force it back and forth. Alright, so again, make sure you kind of get everything lined up. You want to make sure everything's straight. We're going to give this a little turn there. I'm sure they've got some other tool too to make sure this is all lined up straight, but you know, nothing more than the eyeball. Put that back on. Again, we'll take our 5mm. I don't know why I keep thinking 4mm. And we're just going to kind of tighten that down. Get that started. Can you hold on to the fork?
Sure.
Just want to make sure that's straight. I'm not going to tighten that down too much yet. Get our bolts back in. And hopefully we have enough battery power on that. We're back. That battery literally died as soon as we were, as I was saying it. It was quite ironic. We got the fork back on. It's usable, and we're going to put the bike back on the scale here, and we'll see what our weight savings is since we've replaced tires and now the fork.
You got it. It's good.
So what do we got there now, Brady?
27.6.
27.6. We're down to 27.6. We've saved pretty close to 5 pounds already on this bike, just from replacing the fork and the tires. Those were really inexpensive, pretty much standard tools you pretty much already have in your house. And yeah, I don't know what to say. It's this slowly becoming almost like a race bike for London now, just by replacing a few basic parts. In our next part 3, we are going to go ahead and replace the stem and the handlebars to a carbon one. And again, if you shop around, you can get some pretty inexpensive handlebars and stems. Won't cost you more, you know, $40–50 for, you know, a cheap carbon stem and or cheap carbon handlebar and stem. Is going to be, depending on what you get, either aluminum or carbon. It's going to be roughly around, you know, another $30. You know, these are just basic, simple things to replace, you know, to lighten up the bike. So we'll see you next time.